Hi everybody, just popping up one more time to let you guys know we have another episode of 40k Charted going live on Beasts of War, so come across and join backstage if you want to hear about some of the troops and the forces that we're going to be adding in to our 30k armies on Beasts of War.
Flames of War brings you the battles of World War II in epic 15mm scale. Go to the hub on beastsofwar.com to find news, tactics and tutorials about the game.
I'm Warren, a huge fan of tabletop games, but few games out there have a story so deep as Warhammer 40k. I'm setting out to explore this vast universe and the game with my trusty guide, AJ. So join us on Warhammer 40k Charted. Okay, so to continue, this is the final part of our series this time around. We may come back to it, about the life and times of the Emperor. Emperor, this is your life. So, yeah, we have now reached the Horus Heresy. So we talked in the first in the series about the origins of the Emperor. We then talked through the kind of the chronology from the perspective of the Emperor. What was he doing at each of the stages? Now we're at the Horus Heresy. So the Emperor had went back, we believe, to work on this webway project, this ability for mankind to travel without being in the warp. My own thoughts on that is that was key, because if he wanted to kill the belief in things like demons and stuff like that, humanity had to have a way of never witnessing them, or reducing the amount of contact between them, because while something is standing there in front of you, it's very difficult not to believe in it. So I'm thinking of it from this kind of perspective. Yeah. But by him doing that, obviously the stage was set for heresy. We're not going to get into the Horus Heresy itself per se, because it's a big topic. We'll cover that separately sometime. But the Chaos Gods basically played on the emotional, I don't know, would you say there were weaknesses? Because I'm always very reluctant to talk about human emotions as weaknesses, because sometimes they're also our strengths. But there were little emotional aspects within the Primarchs, especially Horus.
Yeah, they were fundamentally they were tricked. Chaos used these opportunities to get at all the Primarchs that eventually were tainted. With Horus, it was on Davin, we talked before about whenever he was wounded. He was shown images by the sorceress that showed what the Imperium as it would end up. So he was shown images of the 41st millennium as we know it. And obviously within the Imperium, there's no statue to Horus.
No.
But because he was looking into the future, he thought that he had not been shown enough care to give him the glory of statues. So
he was the War Master.
He was the War Master. So there was this great tragedy in the fact that he was betrayed by Chaos to show him a future that was going to happen if he continued upon that path. And unfortunately, the Emperor was so far removed from his sons that he couldn't protect them and couldn't show them the true light.
So the Emperor was on Terra. Terra. Talk us through this period of what was he doing during the Horus Heresy? And he was kind of locked away, really.
For a lot of it, he was locked away. It was very much left down to on Terra anyway. It was Rogal Dorn, the Imperial Fist Primarch, and Malcador.
Yeah. Now we'll come. Let's talk about Malcador, because we've mentioned him.
Yeah.
But he's actually very important in this period now. This is where Malcador, it truly makes his mark.
At this point, the Emperor is very much kind of hidden away. He is on the Golden Throne, and he's providing that light of the Astronomicon. Malcador is the regent of Terra. He's in charge of Terra. So at this point in time, he is commanding pretty much a lot of the Imperium, because Horus he's just found out that Horus has turned. Rogel Dorn has returned to Earth, returned to Terra with this information. And Malcador is now very worried. What happens then is Malcador puts in place various organizations to assist the Imperium. We've a picture of Malcador actually, with the Emperor. So the Emperor is the gentleman in the gold armor, and in front is Malcador. Now Malcador he's obviously just a man. We can see that he's very much just a man. He has the bearing. He's often described as having the bearing of a priest. But he essentially wears very drab robes. He was a tremendous psyker. He was probably only second to the Emperor himself. So he's very, very powerful psyker. But as the kind of war progresses, as the heresy progresses, he develops a number of organizations. When Garrow returns to Earth, who was one of the Death Guard, who was kind of betrayed on Istvan.
Yeah.
Or in the Istvan system. He returns to Earth with a bunch of escapees.
Yeah.
Basically to bring the message of Horus's betrayal. He then uses those Marines to create what was the precursor to the Grey Knights. He creates the Knights Errant, and that was kind of headed up by the likes of Garrow, Nathaniel Garrow.
So this was the core. You know, you've got to go out and seek out this disease that is within the Imperium, and destroy it. So it became, wherever you find it, you destroy it, whether it's among our enemies or among our brothers. Yeah, you go out. One of the things I've actually noticed, if you have a look at the Emperor, we've got two pieces of art of the Emperor. He looks almost Native American, doesn't he? He has a.
He does. Yeah, he does.
He has. You know, when we talk about the shamans that created him, you know, he has an almost a Native American tribesman. I wonder what if we bring up the other piece of art there.
You can see it more clearly actually from the side profile.
You know, if you look at him, he does have that almost Native American kind of a look about him. You know, which again suggests to me about this shamanism, these shamans that ultimately became the embodiment of him. He's just an incredible character, though. When you look at him, you know, he's just. This is a very famous piece of. It's a part of a very famous piece of art. This is where Horus and the Emperor meet for the final battle, with the slaying of Sanguinius. Tell us about that, actually, AJ. So you know, well, you're. I don't want to jump ahead. You're on Malcador. Yeah. Malcador is putting in place the defense of Terra. Yeah. He's put in place the precursors to the Grey Knights to go out and actively hunt down.
He's also created the Assassinorum, the group of assassins. Got a couple of pictures here of the newer assassin models. So he was the first sort of Grand Master of the Assassinorum. He was basically pulling together a team that could assassinate various members of the heresy, of the traitor legions. Probably most famous of all was the Night Lords. Yeah. Conrad Kurz. He was famously killed by an assassin. Although he almost let it happen. There's kind of hints that he kind of allowed. He knew that his assassin was coming for him, and he allowed it to happen.
Why?
It's unclear. I think he regretted maybe what he had done. So it's an interesting one. If anyone else has any more information on that, let me know. But I know that the kind of he allowed the assassin to bear down on him.
So at what point then did the Emperor get back involved?
So as the legions draw near, as the traitor legions draw near, the Emperor eventually realizes he has to leave the Golden Throne, and this is when Malcador takes up the Golden Throne. Ultimately, it was a sacrifice
to continue this Astronomicon, this light.
Because we had, exactly.
Because all the legions, the allied legions, had to be able to make their way back. The loyalists.
We had at Calth, for example, the Ultramarines had been dragged away from Earth. A few of the other legions, the Space Wolves, the Dark Angels, had all been kind of embroiled in their own sort of wars. So they were now kind of re-entering kind of Terran space. And they needed the Astronomicon to kind of guide them in. So it was important that beam didn't break. So that's why the Sigillite, Malcador, he sort of installed himself in the Golden Throne. Now,
it killed him, didn't it?
It killed him. It basically sucked it out his life force. The Emperor was a much more powerful being. Even though Malcador was incredibly powerful for a human being,
still was a fraction of the power of the Emperor.
Yeah. So it eventually just sucked out all of his energy. But it gave the Emperor enough time to board Horus's battle barge, the Vengeful Spirit. Basically, what happened was Horus realized that he didn't have much time until the other legions arrived, and that he had to play his final card, which was lowering the shields on his battle barge and allowing the Emperor to meet him. Now, the teleport kind of went a little bit awry, and they ended up scattering the forces that boarded. And Sanguinius ended up finding Horus first. Sanguinius was actually already wounded by this point. He'd been wounded in the battle, and he fought Horus at a disadvantage. It's said that if they were kind of fully fully healed, they both would have fought equally. However, with Sanguinius already wounded,
bring up the artwork as well there.
He's you can actually see Sanguinius just lying off screen. There's just the Horus. That's Horus's mace. But Sanguinius by this point has already been killed. Sanguinius knew that the only thing that he could do was inflict enough damage on Horus to then allow the Emperor to bestow the fatal wound. So Sanguinius was able to cause a chink in the armor of Horus.
Now Horus had already further mutated or something by this stage. Horus was even more powerful. You would wonder how Horus could even have matched up to the Emperor in the first place.
Yeah. Well, Horus had obviously had the power of chaos on his side. So he probably had psychic ability. He probably had innate kind of power within him. When they finally met, it took the Emperor's entire strength and his entire life force to focus on the chink in Horus's armor to punch through. That used all of his energy, and he obviously became lifeless. His troopers then took him straight back to Earth, and that's when he was ensconced upon the Golden Throne. Now,
did they put him on the Golden Throne to keep him alive, or did they put him on the Golden Throne to keep the Astronomicon alive? What was the?
Again, it was both. It was to preserve his life, and it was also because the Sigillite was out of energy. He had become dust. Yeah. It had actually destroyed his body as well as his mind and his soul. So they got the Emperor on the throne just in time for that Astronomicon to continue, and for the Emperor's body to essentially be put on life support.
Now, there is artwork of the Emperor on the throne itself, isn't there?
Yeah. This is probably a good while after the actual act itself of putting him on the throne, but it's probably quite different to what the throne would have looked like initially. There probably wouldn't have been as many wires as that, for example.
Now, is the Emperor effectively a corpse?
Yeah.
on the throne then.
Yeah, he's known as the Carrion Lord. He's essentially the dried up remains of what was the Emperor's body. His soul is very much still alive.
Yeah.
And that exists primarily in the warp. But what you have on the throne is essentially a lifeless cadaver.
So, why didn't he die fully? How does the throne keep him alive?
As far as we know, it was essentially a sort of stasis field. Much in the same way as Guilliman much later was kind of put into a sort of stasis field. The throne is the same, and it's kind of a life support. It just keeps him just alive enough. Now, this is powered in a rather typically grimdark way by...
This is going to be more death, isn't it? Yeah.
By thousands of souls every day. So
this is where we get to the ritual sacrifice then, yeah?
That's it, yeah. Essentially, so the Emperor can't feed like we feed. Obviously, he's titty bread, essentially, which is our slang for dead.
Yeah.
But basically what happens is he feeds upon the souls of psychers. So it can't just be like we'd be no good at it. We'd be no use to him, you know?
Yeah, because we're just Ultramarines.
Yeah.
With our guns. Yeah.
We're no use to him. But,
okay.
But there are thousands of these black ships. People are terrified of these throughout the Imperium. And these black ships sort of scour the universe for psychers. When they find a psyker, sometimes they put them into the Schola Psychana, which is kind of where the battle the battle psychers go to sort of train. They realize the potential within that psyker to harness their power. But more often than not, they go on to the black ships to return to Terra to feed the Emperor. We've actually got a picture of what this would look like.
Ooh.
So as you can see, the psychers are muzzled. Quite often they're kind of...
That's horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah, they're implanted with these things, basically to stop them going off.
So it's suppressants.
Yeah.
You know, these cages over their heads and things like that are suppressing the psychic abilities.
Yeah, it's stopping them from nothing would be worse than demonic possession whilst traveling through the warp for one of these guys. It would just cause an absolute nightmare.
So the black ships are out basically harvesting these people. They're assessed. If they can be made use of, they'll be made use of. Otherwise, they're put onto these prison ships, and then they're sent back to Terra to be sacrificed.
Yeah, and the thing as well is that even if they think they might be able to use them, if they haven't met their quota, then they will still feed them to the Emperor, because they would rather have the souls for the Emperor than more psychers.
So whenever we see a librarian or whatever on the battlefield, he's actually very, very lucky that he's even there.
Yeah, and he has to be the best of the best and the strongest willed of all. Librarians are even rarer. You know, the likes of a man who is allowed to go into the Schola Psychana and train to be even one of the weird vein psychers or the Primaris psychers. They are the pinnacle of what a psyker can be, and they're probably some of the less powerful ones. There just so happens that their power is just enough to be controlled to an extent. They're still dangerous.
So the more powerful a psyker you are, the more likely you could end up bundled in with this lot on your way back to Terra to be cut open in front of the Emperor.
If you're not already too dangerous, you might just be killed.
There on the spot.
On the spot, because you might be already too dangerous to put into a ship.
And do we know, this is getting gruesome now, but do we know how the execution or the sacrifices take place? Or
not exactly, but I'm imagining it's
not going to be nice. No, it's not going to be nice.
I'd imagine it's probably similar to the same way the likes of the Dark Eldar harvest souls for kind of to stop their souls slipping to Slaanesh. So I'd imagine it's through inflicting pain, all that kind of usual grimdark sort of nastiness.
So the throne itself then has become like a central MacGuffin in the whole story. But the Emperor is essentially dead in body, is just there in terms of his soul, his essence. And what about the throne itself? What condition is it in?
It's not good. Much like everything else in the Imperium, we've forgotten how things work. And this is particularly true for the Golden Throne. There's been a fault discovered, and slowly but surely that fault or that crack is getting worse and worse and worse. So more souls are needed every day. It's less efficient a machine. It's getting to the point where there's only so much longer that can be sustained by the admech who kind of look after it, because eventually they're just going to forget how anything works on that machine. This is one of the reasons why we have seen the rise of the Illuminati. And we've touched briefly on these guys earlier on in this sort of series, but basically the Illuminati are searching for descendants of the Emperor.
Yeah.
So anyone that's kind of from his bloodline. The reason they're searching for him is to create the same situation the shamans had whenever they committed the mass ritual suicide. The crucial element to this is that suicide must happen at the exact moment the Emperor's body finally dies. If it happens after that, then they lose the Emperor's soul to the warp.
So the only way to be sure is to kill him.
That's what one branch of this kind of organization, a secret organization within a secret organization, are planning to do that, because they fear as well that in actual fact the Golden Throne might last too long.
Yeah.
That humanity might have already collapsed by the time the Emperor expires.
Oh, so rather than being the last hope for humanity, installing him into the Golden Throne, it may have been better to have just let him die, or
it may have been, although that might have been a massive gamble, because in actual fact, what happens then is maybe he can only be reincarnated at the same time as these star children, his descendants.
Now, he was originally considered to be a star child. Yeah. We know that he wandered for 35,000 years or something like that, so created one or two of his own. They are now considered star children. So
they're considered, they're called sensei, but essentially they contain a small fragment of that energy that the star child had. So.
And how do they track these sensei down? How can they tell whether who might be a son or daughter of the Emperor?
As far as I believe, they are actually psychic blanks. So in actual fact, they have absolutely no presence in the warp. So if you can imagine that, if you have a completely blank canvas, these are like little dark spots within a dark, within a dark starry night. The only way I can describe it is I've got a little dog, and he's a little black dog, and he has a wee bit of white on his chin, and whenever he goes out into the garden at night, I can't see him at all until he faces me.
All right.
But how I can tell whenever he's facing away from me is that it's the moving black dot against a black, So the bit that has absolutely no resonance at all.
It's how much more black could it be?
It's
none more black, really. Okay.
If that makes any sense, I know that might not be the best analogy in the world, but it's kind of he's that little black bit that's moving along, and I can't see anything else.
So it is possible to detect these people, these individuals.
So,
and are there thousands of them? Is that what the expectation is?
Yeah, I think there is thousands of them, but then spread over the whole of the Imperium that it's still very, very hard to track these guys down.
And they're being secretly tracked down, or are they being openly tracked?
They are being secretly tracked down because the problem is the Inquisition don't really like this because it upsets the sort of status quo of the Imperium. If you can imagine, their outlook is very much, we need to maintain the status quo of this situation. You know, humanity's just surviving by the thread, and you want to take this massive gamble to kill the Emperor and kill all of his descendants. You know, that's probably too big.
Yeah, it does. It is high stakes, isn't it?
It is very high stakes. So it is. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of the Inquisition that don't like this at all.
Yeah.
And they're very kind of worried about that. Yeah, so it's just, you know, it's one of those things that you don't know what. The other thing is that some of, again, getting back to our old friends, the Eldar, some of this Illuminati have allegedly gained access to the Black Library.
Ah, no, that's interesting.
So it looks like sometimes the Eldar are willing to help the situation. And that might be, again, another link to that god that you need.
Well, there ends our look at the Emperor. But I have a question about the Imperium. There was a period when the Emperor was in charge. There was a period where he hid himself away, and effectively Malcador was in charge. Who's in charge now? Is there a president of the Imperium?
The Emperor is still at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
But just
Can he communicate?
No. But just below him, there is kind of a council called the High Lords of Terra, and they basically keep an eye on.
Do we know any of them by name?
A few of them. Most of them are the likes of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Fabricator General, who's kind of their most senior ranking official, is always on the High Lords of Terra. So whoever that is at that time. I think Marnius Calgar has been on the High Lords. Although that's quite unusual because the Space Marines are operate generally outside of the Imperium to an extent.
They are a component of the Imperium rather than the central core of it, which is very bureaucratic now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always the Ecclesiarch, who is the highest ranking Ministorum, so the highest ranking religious figure, and different.
So the Imperium is now run by committee.
Essentially, yeah.
Ooh, that explains a lot, doesn't it? That explains a lot, and that opens the door for in the narrative series of 40k Charted, where we'll be headed next.
Now, what keeps that interesting and what we'll be talking about in an upcoming episode is the fact that these High Lords, they're not on their own at the top of the food chain. There's another branch that sits alongside them, and that's the Inquisition. So even though they're at the top of the food chain, there's always throughout all of the Imperium, so from the High Lords all the way down, this organization, the Inquisition, you're always keeping tabs on everybody.
And it's all in parallel. Okay, well, that's your lot as far as we're concerned on the Emperor. What have you got to say about it? Because, again, let's share and share alike. Thank you very much for watching this. In a future little mini-series, we're going to be next looking at the structure of the Imperium. I have a good handle now on Chaos. I have a good handle now on the story of the Emperor and what the condition is. However, what I would really like to learn now is the structure of the Imperium and how that can affect the storylines I can come up with and the shape of the armies and backgrounds that I go on and create. AJ, thank you. Guys, thank you, and we'll see you in the next edition of 40k Charted. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Right, so we have a few links up to help you out. Check out the playlist. We also have a subscribe option, and remember, if you subscribe, to click the bell to ding our dong. Finally, if you're into binge watching and you want a whole lot more 40k Charted, come on over to beastsofwar.com, join Backstage, and you get early access to all of the seasons.